So we had a big game at the top of the WSL with Arsenal versus Man City. I thought I'd start in the 81st minute, mainly because of a refereeing issue, but I'll start by touching on this 2-3-5 by Man City, with Hemp and Fowler sharing this number 8 and left wing position, and Hasegawa playing at CDM but being supported by defenders. Bunny Shaw was constantly on the shoulder of the defence, threatening in behind, but when Man City got the ball out into wide space and looked across, Bunny Shaw was always looking to try and peel towards the back post to be on the blind side of the defender. Quick note on Marnham, who's playing as the CAM out of possession here, a role which was initially being held by Little, where she's trying to track Hasegawa and prevent Man City's metronome from keeping the play progressing. Eventually, Fowler and Hemp are able to combine in this left-hand space. You can see Bunny Shaw peeling towards that right-hand side. With her being as far as she is, she really causes the defence for Arsenal to stretch and forces them to have this space between the fullback and centre-back, which is what Fowler, Hemp and the Man City fullback were looking to try and exploit. On this occasion, it eventually leads to Hemp being able to cross from the left-hand side half space towards the back post, and Shaw's header goes wide. But the reason her header goes wide is this quite blatant push by Catley. Fortunately for Arsenal, there's no VAR. I don't usually touch on refereeing decisions, but given the importance of the fixture to the finishing positions of these two teams, and that it was 1-1, this non-event in that the referee did nothing basically dictated the result. With all that being said, we're going to move on to the 47th minute, with Arsenal building up in essentially this 2-4 shape, with the fullback for Arsenal looking to take advantage of Man City's 4-1-2-3 pressing shape, which in the last 10 or so minutes moved to more of a 4-2-4 to stop all short passing and game management by Arsenal and try and force turnovers in Arsenal's defensive third. So on this occasion, we see Arsenal happy to play these longer balls out towards the right hand side. We see that here initially with this ball out into Lacasse, but later on we see the same thing with long balls out towards Bethme, with McCabe having pushed up higher and Russo in support, whereas later we have Blackstenius and Marnham, with Russo being on the pitch at this point. Arsenal were happy to have her dribble in those wide spaces, dragging the team up the pitch, allowing them to set up into their 2-4-3-2 midfield shape. Fortunately for Man City, they're able to defend it on this occasion. Moving on to the 36th minute, we get to see that 2-3/2-4 shape. At this point, just Walty is deeper, with Palova a little bit higher on this right hand side, and Man City looking to try and press and force an error out of Arsenal's defensive unit, especially out of Zinsberger, which we get to see with Kelly rushing the goalkeeper rather than cutting the passing lane to Zinsberger's short passing options and then pressing the goalkeeper. So with that rushed pass out, both by Zinsberger and then Ruben Moy, and Man City narrowing the gap between them and the ball, they're able to win back possession. I just want to focus on Kelly's position and how she's pulling out towards, of course she's a right winger, but pulling out towards this right wing, and we get to see how that will of course influence the distance between the two centre backs and the potential space for Bunny to be able to exploit if Man City are able to play an early enough through ball, which unfortunately they're not able to do. And then from there, Kelly whips in a cross. My focus during these crosses was on Bunny Shaw because she constantly pulled towards the back post. So on this occasion, that's going to be the left hand side. Doing that, it creates this space between the centre back and essentially is creating this 2v2 back post. And generally speaking, as defenders, you always want to have an extra player. Fortunately, the cross is poor and Zinsberger is able to claim possession. Moving much deeper in the game, I thought it would be good to just quickly show that more intense 4-2-4 press, looking to try and force Arsenal into not playing those short goal kicks and force them long. We get to see some deja vu here with, instead of that long ball into Lacasse, we now have a similarly long ball but out here into Mido, being supported by Moritz and Blackstenius running in behind. But then also I thought it would be good to just point out Marnham's position, where she's playing between the lines and she was looking to be that option if Arsenal played short beyond the initial line of pressure by Man City. Going back to the 30th minute, Arsenal building up in this 2-3 or 2-4 shape. So we get to see that here with the centre backs and midfield pair of Walty and Palova, with the two fullbacks flanking. McCabe being quite withdrawn, really a lot less adventurous than Catley on the left hand side, who was constantly looking to try and overlap and provide support for Ford, and Little at this point playing between the lines, typically towards that right hand side. So we can see this play developing, McCabe still staying deep, Catley pushing higher up on this left hand side just off screen. Walty and Palova as the CDMs, although Walty's a lot more disciplined and expected to stay deeper, with Palova moving back and forth between between that space between the lines and a more CDM position, whilst Little is occupying this right hand side half space to try and keep the Man City defenders relatively narrow and create more space for Lacasse, especially since she wasn't going to be getting any help from McCabe more often than not. So we see what I mentioned here with Walty still staying deep, Little making movements in that left hand side half space, and Pelova dribbling to try and link the Arsenal defence and attack. This is also a really great scenario because it shows the quite disciplined shape here of Man City in that 4-5-1. So there's also just quickly pointing out Fowler and Hemp having swapped position. Hemp was, at least on paper, meant to be a CAM, but she was constantly swapping with Fowler, and here's Catley, as I mentioned, looking to try and push up the pitch. Ultimately on this occasion, whilst Little's movement to try and create space for Lacasse was defended, we eventually see the ball passed back into Pelova centrally by she's forced to turn out, but eventually we see McCabe also push more centrally and try and fire a ball into Russo, looking to try and drop off the line. She's tracked quite diligently here by Kennedy, and with that really disciplined 4-5-1 shape by Man City and the really narrow space between the lines, Russo's touches immediately contested. Man City regain possession and try and play through the Arsenal counter press. But just as we mentioned how Man City tried to force errors out of Arsenal's defensive unit, we see the same here with Arsenal continuing that press, looking to try and force an error out of Kieran Keating and the rest of the defensive unit. Continuing to look at Arsenal's midfield shape, we've got this scenario in the 62nd minute with them in a 2-4 with Marnham between the lines. Of course, given that you now have Marnham on the pitch, Arsenal were happy to play those early long balls in behind, those balls being low risk with low success rate but high reward, which they were happy to use given the game state. On this occasion it was defended and Arsenal looked to try and counter press, but Man City clear and Arsenal can set back up into that midfield shape again. As I mentioned, with the deeper build up, we've got Marnham working that space between the lines, Laxtenius on the shoulder of the last player looking to run or threaten him behind, Catley taking this half position, not quite at left back, more tucking inside, and then hopefully as play progresses towards this left hand side she'll be able to push out into that left wing, allowing Ford to be able to narrow more centrally. And so after the ball was played into Marnham looking to try and overload this right hand side space, Arsenal switch possession early towards that left hand side into Ford, and we immediately see, as I mentioned, Catley racing up in support, Marnham having now come across towards this left hand side looking to support that build up with Russo getting into the box to contest any crosses. The initial attempts, the cross is defended, Arsenal of course counter press, they win possession back and Arsenal try again. Okay, moving on towards the last 10 minutes or so of the game, this injury time. The main reason that I wanted to share this scenario was for Arsenal counter-attacking on regain of possession, of course threatening towards goal, but also managing the game given they're ahead. Also, it's a good example because it shows Man City setting up into essentially this 3-1 shape where just as throughout the rest of the game Kennedy is your anchor, but then they had Alexandri and Blackstad somewhat as the centre-backs beside her, with Hasegawa as the CDM ahead of them in this rotating 3-1. So Hasegawa, yes, she's meant to be the CDM, but she can pop up as either one of those wide centre-backs too, and then another player will fill in at CDM instead. This allows them to of course push more players higher up the pitch, with the likes of Castellanos as the centre midfielder looking to try and still knit the defence and attack together, although they are still trying to typically build up in those wide spaces, crossing it towards the back post for Bunny Shaw, which is what we see as this play develops, with Castellanos between the lines, Fowler receiving the ball under a lot of pressure, although Blackstad's possession is immediately contested and Arsenal basically just hoofed it whenever they felt like there was any sort of danger towards their goal. On this occasion, despite Hasegawa trying to create space for Kennedy, it eventually leads to an Arsenal counter-attack going back to the 24th minute. I just wanted to show from was initially a throw-in, a foul on Rudd, we now have a free kick with Man City's deep build-up in this 2-4 or 3-2 shape. I say 3-2 because your left back here has actually inverted to create the passing lane out wide into Hemp or Fowler at left wing, which is disrupting the position of the Arsenal centre midfielders. So we can see that here with Pelova being drawn higher up the pitch, which will create more space in behind for the likes of both Fowler and Hemp to combine. It also created a dilemma for Little, because when just Hasegawa stayed as the CDM, then Little would track her and make it really difficult for Hasegawa to be able to play passes from that central position, which of course has more options to either side. But with Pelova having stepped out, that allowed Little to be able to, instead of taking that halfway position, press towards Hasegawa and eventually force force Man City towards this right hand side, when they play a number of quick 1-2s. And again, we see how the Man City shape is creating problems, where we actually have Walty, one of our centre midfielders, being drawn out towards Ruud here, which is creating space for Bunny Shaw in behind, as well as also Kelly staying relatively deep, relatively close to the Man City half, making it really difficult for Arsenal to be able to defend her here, which we see in the distance that Catley is taking up between herself and Ruben Moy in an attempt to try and prevent an easy through ball for Bunny Shaw in behind, but allows Man City to somewhat establish a relatively safe position here at the halfway line. I think this was the main reason I liked this minute, because this wide angle really shows you that 2-3-2-3 shape, and you could always see how Hemp and Fowler were swapping positions, as well as also just the difficulty of pressing for Arsenal here, despite the fact that they've tried to focus on who's considered the danger with little pressing Hasegawa. Eventually the ball gets out towards the danger players in Hemp and Fowler, and it looked to of course try and combine in this left hand side and create crossing opportunities for Bunny Shaw peeling away. So with that, if you've enjoyed the video, consider sharing on social media, subscribing, giving the video a like, and comment on which fixture you want me to focus on next. And with that, we're out.